All right, ladies and gentlemen, Survivor Indianapolis Season 5 is over. Finale is here. You've watched it, I hope. If not, we're going to talk about it anyways, so get ready. First, before we get into the episode, I do want to say at the top, please, if you have not yet, if you're watching this on Facebook, go to YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're watching it on YouTube, you haven't subscribed, give us a subscribe. If you're watching this episode, I'm assuming that you're a big fan. If you're watching a recap of a finale of the 5th season, I'm assuming that you're enjoying the content. Also, just give us your feedback, whether it's comments on the video here, comments on Facebook. If you're not in the Facebook group, join the Facebook group. Feel free to talk to me about it in person. If you see me, if you know me personally, message me. I need the positive feedback or negative feedback just in terms of what is going on with the video content side of things. Those of you that do know how much work goes into these seasons, you know that the video, you may not know, but the video is probably the hardest part to get done this season. Alex and I put in a ton of work, and in the past 4 seasons, I've put in a ton of work for content that I am proud of on one hand, but also is obviously far inferior to anything that Survivor's putting out. And so if this is not really something that the people care about, then we can put our time elsewhere. But if this is something that you like, you enjoy these recaps, you enjoy the episodes that we're putting out, that's something that I need to know so that we can know that we're not just putting in this time and effort. I enjoy the editing. I enjoy going through the video. However, it is a lot of time and work. Alex, you know, now you've gotten a taste of it, and you even haven't you probably put in maybe like half the time that I've put in, maybe a little bit more than half the time that I've put in.
If that.
Okay, well, I'm trying to be fair to you because you did edit the first episode pretty much all by yourself. I did give you I gave you like the footage and kind of ordered it in order of events, but like it's a lot of work, and so just having some idea that people are enjoying this, even if it's 10 people, that's fine. But like I hear nothing most of the time, and occasionally if it happens to come up in conversation, someone will say, "Oh yeah, I watched that recap. That was really good." But you know, it's far and few between, to the point where I just want to make sure that if this is something that people want, we're here to give it to you. And if not, then we can focus our attention on the game itself a little bit more and beefing that up and making it even bigger and better with that extra time. So let us know. With that, let's go ahead and just get into the real meat and potatoes here of the episode. We have a big one. We have a good one. So Alex, we can really start anywhere. I think it makes the most sense to just go ahead and start at the beginning. Yeah. We'll probably spend more of our time later in the episode, but let's go ahead and start at the beginning with this challenge. What are your thoughts here on this final immunity challenge?
Yeah, the floor is lava is a challenge that is very difficult, especially for those that don't have great balance. As you guys saw, you know, I tried doing this challenge when we did our testing for it, and my feet are big, so I was like, these pavers are pretty small. I'm going to go barefoot and see how that works for me. And I think that was a big mistake by by trying to go barefoot. So I think keeping shoes on was interesting. Now, I will say, I thought the way Chris kind of kept the triangle the whole time when he was kind of going, like it was like one in front of him and two, one to his left. He was on the right one, where most people were just kind of going, in a straight line. He was kind of using like this triangle method, which I thought, why is he doing that? But it worked out pretty well for him. First off, he was ahead coming back, and he had to restart because he lost his balance. But I understood why he was doing it for his hand, and I thought, oh, that's pretty interesting. So I thought that was pretty unique that he was being able to do that. You can hear me on the challenge tell Adrian that her foot touched the grass. I went back and watched several times to make sure I did not miss that call. I think it was pretty close. I mean, I could have probably let it slide, but I just wasn't sure the exact rules. So if it was scraping the grass with your foot is okay, as long as you don't touch the ground, then I apologize, Adrian, for making you restart. But just a lot of resiliency here from Moretta to just, stay the course. She never really got too far ahead, even though she was behind, and never went too fast, never went too slow, just kept a steady pace. And sometimes that's all that it takes. But I thought this was a really fun challenge. Would love to see it used again in future seasons. And I think that, you could tell it was a very fair advantage. It wasn't one where, we've seen Chris kind of be this dominant athletic player, right? It wasn't one where he was able just to dominate completely with his athleticism, even though he did get off to an early lead.
Yeah, I'll say to go back to the Adrian point a little bit. Uh, I honestly think that it was probably she was probably was fine, and you didn't need to have her go back. However, she more than once would like not keep her items with her. So I don't think she had any shot at winning this. So like, let me explain a little bit better. And I don't know how, if she just wasn't thinking about it or didn't realize or what. But all four of our competitors had a paver, a square. That was maybe like 9 inches, 8 inches. It wasn't quite a foot, and two bricks, just standard bricks. And they're supposed to use those to travel across the grass, as you see in the video. She even when you right after you had her go back, she like puts her feet down on one of them, puts another one forward, and then like puts a third one out, and then leaves the first one at the starting cone and tries to keep moving forward with just two pieces now. And like that's never going to work. It's at all not at all how it's intended to work. And then I noticed later on when she actually makes it to the checkpoint with two of the three pieces, then falls and can't figure out how to like get her footing, has to go back to the checkpoint and goes back with just two pieces still and moves forward again. So somewhere along the line, she dropped one of the bricks towards the beginning and just was only using two of the three. So I don't think that you having her go back would have changed anything other than maybe she finishes third instead of fourth, or I'm not even sure where she finished, if it was third or fourth, because Leah fell several times. I think she may have beat Leah, and she was even actually pretty. I'm actually watching it a little bit now. She's really close to Chris because of Chris having to reset. I think she might even be ahead of Chris when Moretta finishes, so she may have gotten second place. But like she was so far behind Moretta still that it was like she would have had to go like basically she was 3/4 of the distance away when Moretta finishes, and just because she was in second place, I don't think that really changes much. It was only a couple of steps in when you called her.
Yeah.
And in terms of Chris's strategy, I think it was inventive. I don't think it was as effective as it seems, and I think it seems more effective than what it actually was because of his athleticism and the way that he just like is a better athlete than the other three people. And so he's making it work for him, but it is not an efficient use. I think Moretta, by the end at least, especially, had the most efficient way of doing it, where you basically have you are on one of either one brick on each foot or the paver for both feet, and then you lay one down and take a step, and lay the other one down, take a step, and then pick up the last one, and then just kind of like go in a line across. You like it's hard to describe on just audio and like a little bit of small bit of video, but you're kind of going in a straight line where you're just like moving one, taking two steps, moving one, taking two steps, because you're like putting your whichever foot is closest to the line on the newest brick or paver, then moving your other foot to the one that you just left that foot from. So if you watch Moretta towards the end, especially, I think that's the way to do this challenge. And I may have to wait a little bit to reuse it just because I don't want to see like part of the fun of this challenge was there really wasn't any prevalent strategy. It wasn't like they could go and see, oh, I've seen someone do this before, or like this is something that you see on Survivor all the time. It's not. So no one was like, this is exactly how you have to do this challenge. Whereas now we're probably going to have at least a few people that are watching that are going to be like, okay, well, Moretta just showed us how to beat this challenge, so now we need to emulate her strategy. And so we might just see a bunch of people kind of emulating that. But other than that, I think a fun challenge. The intention really was to make it so that hopefully it wasn't going to be just like a straightforward cakewalk for a dominant athletic player, that it would have to take some level of strategy. And I think that we saw that. And maybe in a different season, you wouldn't see that, but in this case, you did. So I was happy. I wasn't necessarily happy that Chris lost. I was just happy that it was competitive because we've seen a few in the past that Chris just blew by everybody else. So it's good to see that it was competitive. And even if Chris hadn't have fallen, maybe he would have won. That's up for debate, I guess. But it was a competitive challenge, which is what I wanted to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that Chris probably wins this if he doesn't fall, right? Because he was already ahead of Moretta quite a bit, I think, at this point. Because he got a pretty early turnaround. He hit the checkpoint first, and he was probably about halfway back or close to it, maybe maybe, at least 1/3 of the way back before he fell again. So
Yeah. Yeah, he
I just
falls
thought,
twice.
okay,
So
it felt like, okay, this guy has figured it out. He's gonna end up winning this immunity again. He's gonna go to the final three. Which one of the girls is gonna get cut? And then here comes Moretta, and she's the one furthest away from the camera too. So you're not probably as focused in on her just from the shot that we had, right? Because Chris and Adrian are so close up. But it just that's kind of how Moretta has been in this game. She has always been in it a little bit under the radar, but she just keeps staying steady. And so I
yeah.
kind of thought like the way she ended up winning this challenge is kind of how she's been throughout this game in terms of like never getting her name written down so far and things like that. So I just thought this was a fun challenge, pretty competitive from at least three of the four. Leah said that, challenges really aren't her thing, but she was the oldest one out there as well,
Hmm.
in this group especially, or of this four, I should say. I
Yeah.
think Neil is older than her. No, I think Sonya's older than her too. So
Yeah, they Neil for sure is. I think Sonya
yeah,
also is.
yeah. So she's one of the older competitors, and like, it's a long day. It's the last
Yeah.
challenge on a
Yeah.
Saturday. She's been out there for 10 to 12 hours. So, yeah, I thought she was competitive and for her own self, right? Like she was in it a little bit, but like,
Yeah.
I just don't necessarily think anybody expected her to win. But Moretta winning was probably not the outcome I expected going into this challenge. I thought it would be Chris or Adrian based on what we've seen previously. So Moretta winning this was really big for her because I think there's a chance she might have been voted out.
Yeah, I think that there probably was a good chance that she was the one involved in the tie instead of Adrian. I don't know that for a fact, but I could see a world where she was the one involved in the tie. And if you just
Mhm.
assume that the rock draw goes the same way, then nothing really changes unless Chris has immunity, in which case maybe then they pit the girls against each other. Chris and Leah do, or maybe the girls stay strong and they vote for Leah. Um, who knows? There's a lot of possibilities there
Yeah.
that could change, and it's interesting to think about. But ultimately, we don't know exactly. Chris and Leah, I've talked to them actually in the last couple of weeks, and they both felt pretty confident they could pit the girls against each other.
Mm.
But like, and I understand that perspective. They kind of had done whatever they wanted to almost the entire game. Like Leah in the pre-merge and Chris and Leah together in the post-merge had basically gotten their way every vote. So I understand that attitude at that point. However, Moretta was pretty put off by Leo not voting for her husband, which is hilarious to me because it's like you should have seen that coming for sure. And she was like very agitated. I mean, not angry, but you could tell she brought it up like 3 or 4 times that Leah didn't hold true to her word and voted for Adrian instead of voting for Chris. So if that was a part of this deal before this round that Leah or Chris would get voted for, um, then maybe Moretta stays true to that, and then Adrian stays true to that as well. You never know. So, but unfortunately, we don't have a lot of strategy talk in this round. We have some good confessionals that kind of give us their thoughts of strategy. And it sounds like Adrian's kind of playing both sides. It sounds like Moretta wants to go to the end with the best class, which it's in the confessionals. It sounds like she is saying she wants to keep Chris in the game
Hmm.
and vote out Leah. And somewhere along the line that shifts. I don't know if she talks to Adrian and that shifts, or she talks to Leah and that shifts. Because I would assume she talks to Leah because she keeps saying Leah said that she was going to vote for Chris and she didn't vote for Chris. So I would assume that maybe Leah was able to switch her vote. And um, if that's true, it's a big point for Leah in Final Tribal Council that does not get brought up.
Yeah.
But so we end that time with a really great confessional. Maybe like honestly, maybe my favorite confessional in all of Survivor Indianapolis is Chris there at the end talking about Leah. It is like because here's the thing, it's easy to replicate the like smart aleck like trash talk confessionals. It's easy to replicate the like I don't know what I'm doing. I go like there's a lot of styles of confessionals on the real show that are pretty easy to replicate. You cannot just like replicate the heartfelt, sincere, like tearjerker type moments. You can't just like force that. It has to happen naturally. Whereas a lot of other ones you can kind of force it. Like you can tell if you know Chris well, you know that there's a lot of times where he's trying to be funny or trying to like set up for a funny line or whatever. And I love it. Let's be clear. But
Yeah.
it is a little forced though. It's not just like a natural like spur of the moment thought. Now occasionally it is. It seems like his line about Hamilton, and it seemed natural. It may not have been. It may have been canned, but definitely like the jungles of Portville and like him repeating survival instead of survivor was
Yeah.
like probably at some point, maybe the first time it was not like planned, but after that it's clearly forced. So and again, I don't mind. It's good entertainment. But you cannot just force this heartfelt moment of him opening up about, yeah, I cannot vote for my wife. And he starts off by being kind of jokey. He's like, I have to go home with her. But then he kind of like lets down a little bit and opens up a little bit about like, there's always been this special connection that I've had with her. I just can't vote her. I can't vote her out. So
Yeah.
in that moment, it was just like so great to me that like we have a moment of sincerity and like heartfelt like emotion that if you're a married person and or just in a committed relationship even, you can probably relate to that and like you can feel that. And that's one of the pieces of magic that the real Survivor show does occasionally. I was thrilled to have it on our little show.
Yeah, I mean, you had told me a little bit about this before. You just said there's a really sweet moment there with Chris talking about Leah, and I was like, okay, I'll be interested to see how I respond to this because I'm not always an emotional person, but sometimes I can be. And when I watched it back, I'm not gonna lie, when I was editing the video, I did get a little bit teary eyed, and I think recently, Chris spoke at our church, had a
Mhm.
sermon, and he talked about when he was going through lupus, how there was blood donors that he had to constantly keep getting blood to try to help with everything. And so his wife, I believe every Friday or whatever it is, she goes down to the hospital and donates blood because she said if people hadn't donated blood for you, you wouldn't
You
be
wouldn't.
here. So I want to help out. And so you could just kind of feel like I was like, maybe that was on top of the head, top of mind when I was thinking about this. And I'm just like, man, that is just like this is what love really is. I mean, I know
Yeah.
it's just Survivor, but it's just like, wow. And so you can kind of see, like, yeah, we're playing a game. It's not for $1 million, but it is for bragging rights to say you won. And like, they're both
Yeah.
competitive. They both wanted to win. I mean, just an episode or two ago, Chris was like, "Yeah, I'll vote Leah out with Sonya," and joking around. Like, I don't think he was really going to do it, but you could just tell, like, man, this is really an emotional thing. So I was just like, I know them personally, and I thought it was really sweet. They've basically liked each other since they were teenagers
Hmm.
and got married. They've had a journey right together. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things where he's just very fond of her. She admires him, and he really thought she was going to write his name down. And so I
Yeah.
love her confessional when she's up there at the voting booth and she's like, he didn't trust me. And so it
Yeah.
was just a really sweet moment. And so I was really rooting for them to be able to have this. Now, gameplay wise, was that a smart move by Leah to try to keep Chris in the game? Probably not. But
No, definitely not.
it was,
But
I mean, Chris even says it on his exit interview. Like, I knew I was going to win the game if I got the final three. I was not worried about winning this game. Thought I outplayed them, outwitted them. Like, he outlasted them. Like, he was like, I basically have this game wrapped up in my hands. He's like, but comes down to this dramatic rock draw because we can't get the votes figured out. And it has just thrown Moretta completely off the rocker. I mean, she is losing her mind that Leah is trying to
I
keep Chris in the game. And so
know.
it was a really fun final four vote. We don't make fire, which would have been more dramatic and really fun to see Chris and Adrian have to make fire versus one another.
Man.
But the rock draw, as intense as it was really interesting. And it's just like Chris had a chance. He really did. It
Hmm.
was just crazy how much Leah went to bat for him,
Yeah.
even though she probably knew that he was going to beat her in the end.
Yeah. And I wonder, I didn't ask her this because I just thought of this just now in our interview. I did not ask her, but I wonder if Leah, part of why I felt like she could have done a little bit better in Final Tribal Council. And I wonder if she wasn't prepared because she was just like, I'm going to help Chris get to the end and he'll win, and that's
That's
fine.
fair.
And she just hadn't really fully processed, like, I'm going to be at the end and I'm going to pitch my case.
Yeah.
In terms of Chris's game, we can critique a few things. Obviously, we could say, well, you should have seen this coming. It was going to be tough for you and your wife to get to the end together. Uh, However, I want to say it was Tony. I'm not positive about that, but there is a winner of Survivor who basically has said that he would rather, and I'm pretty sure it was a man, that he would rather not get to the end and have played a game that if it had gotten to the end would win than get to the end and it be like kind of a toss up and it'd be like, well, maybe I do, maybe I don't. That is like sometimes you not only is a big part of the game, obviously, is getting to the end, but it's a lot easier to get to the end if you don't play a game that's worthy of winning. And so that's kind of the dichotomy of the whole thing that is very fascinating. Is one of the things that's very fascinating is that you have to kind of walk that tightrope. And but there are lots of people that have played real Survivor that you watch their game and you're like, man, they should have gotten voted off here, should have gotten voted off here. Like Tony and Kagayana is a good example. Kim in One World, there's lots of different times where you're like, these winners should have gotten voted off several times. They didn't because they were able to socially or otherwise, think about what's the season name, but Mike Holloway winning several challenges, right? So that's kind of like what Chris was trying to emulate without knowing it. It was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna win several challenges, and I'm gonna have a key alliance member and my wife that's going to help me get to the end. And it worked up to four. But like that's the thing is you can never ever question that if he gets to the end, he would have won, and he was
Yeah.
one vote away. So for me, if I was playing, I would rather be Chris in this game where I'm one vote away. I knew I would have won if I had just won a challenge or like the rocks had been drawn differently. I win the game versus being in the final three and feeling like I have no shot at winning. Like definitely would rather be fourth and know that I had it if I could have just gotten one more challenge, or I had it if I could have drawn a rock. That feels like a little bit easier pill to swallow than basically being like I was drawing dead the whole time and I didn't realize it until I got to the end and got 0 votes or got 1 vote or whatever. That feeling I think would sting more than being
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for Chris, you have to be happy with how you played. I mean, the
Oh
fact
yeah,
that he got here, he even said it like he said Lee brought it up too. Like he's coming to me the last couple of rounds, said they're gonna vote me out, aren't they? They're coming for me, aren't they? Like he was,
yeah,
nervous about it, but he didn't really change the way he was voting with anybody to try to switch things. He could have maybe tried to pull in Cameron and Sonya to vote one of the girls out if he was so worried about that. If he really felt like
yeah.
he could have pulled Cameron and Sonya with him to the final three, right? So, and I think honestly, like maybe taking Moret out earlier and having a Cameron or Sonya around who hadn't been great in challenges would have been a better choice for him. But it was an easy way to kind of navigate the game, I think, for Chris to do the best class alliance.
Yeah.
But then again, who knows if Sonya or Cameron would have turned on him either? I think
But
they would have.
yeah, they would have. But I think a more veteran player than Chris. Obviously, not a knock on him. This is what we see every year that we have a bunch of new players. The returning players usually do better. We've had a few seasons that had some returning players, and they usually do pretty well. Not always win, but like at least play solidly. I think if Chris played again, even if you had this exact same scenario, I think that he probably should have voted off Moretta in Sonya's place. He can pitch it to Adrian as like, this is not a breaking of our alliance. This is Moretta was too close to Shibwe. We had to lose a Shibwe member. We've lost a bunch of Siakam people. Moretta was too close to Shibwe. She would have turned on us. You can just lie, make that up. That's not
Right.
true, but just make that up. Because it doesn't seem like Moretta and Adrian's connection is all that strong. We know they have the best class thing, but we don't have a lot of like video footage, at least, of them making plans together, talking together. You have a lot of Moretta talking to Chris, and so maybe you want to vote off Adrian instead of Moretta in that spot. But like, I think that like voting one of them off in the Sonya spot, and then you do Sonya, and Annie, or I guess it would have been Annie, and then either Moretta or Adrian, and then Sonya, and then Cameron at 4, right?
Yeah.
And
Well,
then you
Leah's in
have
there
your
too, right?
yeah. I'm just saying like your final three then would be either it would be Chris, Leah, and then either Adrian or Moretta, whichever one he thought was most loyal to him.
Yeah.
It appears honestly that it probably would be Moretta,
Hmm.
but they both were too loyal to him, in my opinion. And so like voting one of them off instead of Sonya, and then voting off Sonya next, and then voting off Cameron next. That may not have worked because it may have been hard to get the girls to not vote for Cameron because remember he threw the challenge as a means of saving Cameron. He at least that was his perception that he needed to save Cameron. Maybe that wasn't true. Maybe he didn't need to save Cameron there. Maybe Cameron wasn't gonna get voted off. But that's how he felt. So it is potentially tricky. Start changing things and maybe the numbers fall a different way. But I do think that the only thing I would really say for him is that maybe if he cuts Adrian or Moretta a few rounds earlier and keeps Sonya, who was loyal to the end for him,
Yeah.
and Cameron, who maybe would have flipped, but I don't think Sonya would have. Cameron might have. The problem was all of Cameron's connections were pretty much gone. Cameron's connections were Eli, Drew, Chris, and like that's more or less it.
Mason.
Mason, but that was way earlier.
Yeah.
Moretta and Cameron had not really connected a ton, and then Leah and Adrian obviously hadn't connected to Cameron at all. So it definitely seems like if he cuts one of the two of these younger girls a little earlier, that maybe would have been a smoother path to the end. But you never know. And I think part of it was that he wanted to do this whole best class thing. It was like a fun throwback to when they were, when the two of them were in his class as an advisor, and that may have been a bit of nostalgia, wanting to like kind of just like play up that path again. It was a safer thing for him. He knew that they wouldn't turn, so I can't fault him too much for it. But that's probably the way to a victory, is to cut one of them early.
Yeah, I mean, it makes the most sense, right? So, we end up seeing the results, right? Going to a rock draw. You let Adrian pick first. Or they rock, paper, scissors. That's right.
They rock, paper, scissors for it. And so Adrian won and chose to go first. And
what would you have done in that situation? Would you have picked first, or would you have let the other person pick first and let fate decide your game?
I would have picked first, okay. I think that's the right. I don't think it matters, but I think it's the right call.
Tyson would disagree.
Yeah, I know. But yeah.
He's my favorite. Tyson's one of your favorites. I didn't know.
I know. Well, here's the thing: is like it's a 50-50 if you have two rocks in there. Now, was he talking about a two rocks situation, or was he talking about a group of people?
Now, he had a three rock situation, I believe.
So then he should have gone last. Yes, but with three, you should go last because of the fact that it's a 1 in 3 for the first person to take it. If they take it, then you're good, and then it's a 50-50 for the second person to take it, and if they take it, then you're good. So like you want to go last, but if it's two people, it doesn't really matter if they get it. If they don't, then you're gonna get whatever they give you. So you might as well go first and like feel like at least you made a decision instead of being just given the rock. That's what I'm saying. So the Tyson situation is different. I think he had recently said something about like a two rock scenario.
No, I'm just going back to the season he was on Blood versus Water, right?
I'm following you now. Definitely in his situation, you should go third. But and in this tribal council, some footage issues, obviously, like we always have. And so what you see at the end there is me explaining the tiebreaker rules, because I don't remember who it was, somebody asked that, which like if you're Moretta and Adrian, that should be setting off alarm bells. Like you have a plan 3-1 to vote Chris out, and then they're asking about tiebreaker rules. Like, okay, so something's not happening the way that you thought it was going to happen.
Are we going to a tie?
Yeah, like, oh, interesting. So I was, you see me kind of explaining it. And I was talking about one of our crew members, Ben, who had gone to a tie in season 3, who was helping us out in the audience, and I was using some of the jury to like give a hypothetical scenario of like, oh, if these people voted for these people, so like you see the very, very, very end of that, and I was using the jury to like kind of illustrate how the rule would work. And I think you mentioned fire making. I think in the future that's gonna happen. I think that in the future you can expect. I don't want to do fire making in place of a vote like what Survivor does, but I do want to do that as a tiebreaker at the final 4, and maybe even you have it as a part of a challenge at some point earlier in the game, because that's a fun thing that I was a part of when I played this summer. I did not make fire, but it was a really, really fun challenge, and a really like very fun end to a challenge. As a tribe, feel like you've helped do something like that. I don't know. It's pretty cool. So it made me really want to add it. And John Crabtree has been stumping for that for probably 2 years now. So to me, it's just a matter of time figuring out how to do it, but how to do it in a safe way that will not damage a property that is not mine.
For sure. I feel like we can get we know the right people to help us out with safety things, that we can get this done. Yeah. So it's just a matter of, when, not if.
Oh yeah, for sure. So there's your final 4 pretty much. We're kind of locked in there. Final 3, I have some confessionals of them, kind of talking about their achievements. And what was interesting was I didn't have to go back and like look through. I could have. It might have been cool to take, but it would have taken forever to go back through and highlight some cool moments, or to highlight some other confessionals that they had that kind of showcased their game. But I was able to pull confessionals from these 2 rounds, final 4 and final 3, that I felt like they decently highlighted their game to set up for the final tribal council. I mean, Moretta talks about being on the right side of the votes, having allies and making alliances and having people on her side. Adrian talks about her fear, how that she has backstabbed a lot of people. And that's a positive thing that she's been playing the game and like has been a part of big votes, but also that might hurt some feelings. She's afraid of that. And then Leah's talking about how basically like she's been a part in kind of like maneuvering every vote and maneuvering the game a lot. And she talks about how she's always nervous for tribal council, which is like something she's mentioned almost every episode that she's like talking about being nervous for tribal council. So I think it sets up kind of decently well. Obviously could be better, but it sets up kind of like where their headspace is at going into final tribal council. Um, I'll just say really quickly, I have some thoughts I'll save for later about the final three here, but it felt like none of the three of them were really prepared fully, had really fully processed like I'm gonna have to stand or sit before this jury and plead my case and state my case for why I deserve to win. And it seemed like they were playing to get there without having that mapped out. Did you feel like anything like that or not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think they understood the magnitude of what Final Tribal was. I think that they were
Yeah,
just playing the game round by round and just happy to move on to the next round. And I think probably Leah was the most aware of what is to come at the final three. But at the same time, when you hear their confessionals and you hear them speak at Final Tribal, we'll get to that here in a second. It
yeah,
just felt like they didn't really know how to accurately describe their game to make themselves feel like they should separate what separated them from the other players as the reason why they should get their vote. So I was, I understood Adrian like having fear. Like Moretta was like, I've been in the know on what's going on most time, and Leah kept kind of using the "I'm the oldest person out here" card, and that was kind of her thing. Like I'm just proud of myself. So
yeah,
it, and she should be. No,
yeah,
I'm not saying that, but it's just like, well, what'd you do to win the game? Like
yeah,
why should you win? So I don't think anything really threw me off. I don't think that the final tribal really revealed a lot to me.
yeah,
I don't know how you felt about that. We'll get into here in a second, but um, mostly for me, I hope I'm not jumping the gun here too much, but of the three, I felt like Moretta did the best job explaining what she did in the game, even though her moves weren't that big.
yeah. I think that she had the best tribal council. I think it was marginal. Like I don't think it was like she had an 8 out of 10, and Adrian had a 4, and Leah had a 5. I think it was
Yeah.
like she had a 6 out of 10, Leah had a 5, and Adrian had a 4. Like I think it was like very because like multiple people did say like I felt like they kind of played similar games to some extent, and I don't agree with that statement. I think
Hmm.
that they just didn't do a good job of explaining themselves, and so therefore it seemed like they played a pretty similar game. Really, if you look back at the season in terms of who is making not just making the best moves, but also making like contributing to who like called the shots, who was like the biggest contributing factor. Because we know most of these votes are not just like, hey, I want to vote this person now. I'm going to go do all the work to get all the votes. And I'm going to rally all the numbers. It's usually like a bit of a committee, right? Like 3 or 4 people work together to call the shot, and then they kind of spread the word to other people if they need to, and it's like a collaborative effort.
Hmm.
But it seems to me, based off of the footage that we have and my impressions on the day, that Leo is the one that was calling the shots more than anybody else that was there, at least by a long shot. And not even just calling the shots, but calling the right kinds of shots. There's not hardly like what do I think that Leah should have done differently? Who should she have voted off differently? What should she have done? I mean, I guess you could argue maybe she should have gotten Chris out earlier if she really wanted to win. But like other than, and that's very understandable that she was making choices knowing full well that she was not going to win. So it isn't like she was doing it because she's not smart enough to realize that she wasn't going to win. She knew if she's going to help Chris, that she's going to help Chris, not help herself. And so I'm not critical of that because that was a choice that was made intentionally, knowing that it will lead to a loss, right?
Hmm.
So she's not trying to win at that point. But the rest of the game before that, it feels like she's the one calling the shots much more than Moretta or Adrian. I think that Moretta was like a part of a vote a lot of times where somebody else would come to her, right? Mason comes to her about the Seth vote. Chris comes to her a lot about different votes, and he dictates who's going home. I don't know if Moretta ever dictated who was going home. Not that you have to do that to win the game. I'm not saying that, but it felt like she was used a lot, which is a part of her plan, I think, like to be a friend to all, to be an ally.
Mhm.
And that's a good strategy. Don't get me wrong, but it leaves you feeling like and a lot of times, her ideas would have led to a loss. Like she wanted to keep Chris in the game. She states that all through the end game, last 3 or 4 episodes, or you have confessionals of her saying that, and you have actions where she is the only person she shares her advantage information with is Chris. Like
Yeah.
she trusted him and was working with him above everybody else. And I don't know exactly what changed, which is a little unfortunate. I would assume, based off of what else happened, that Leah got to Moretta and flipped Moretta from voting for Leah to voting for Chris, which is huge. And no one talked about it in Final Tribal Council, which
Yeah.
is a negative for Leah's performance at Final Tribal Council. I mean, just while I'm saying all of this, I have a second point. So one thing did surprise me in this Tribal Council that I didn't notice the day of because I didn't have the full context of the game, and I didn't like it didn't stand out to me even in editing. And I rewatched the episode and it kind of popped it a little bit to me. So I'll get to that in a little bit. All that to say, like I'm not saying that Moretta did not deserve to win. She fully deserved to win. And I think she had the best Final Tribal Council. She won challenges. She was way better at the challenges than Leah and even Adrian. Adrian was solid, but she was better than Adrian at challenges. So that was important to any of the jury members, and that was going to get their vote. She won a couple of clutch challenges that might have saved her from getting voted off. She was good socially. I just think she was not good strategically. And I think Leo was great strategically and was at worst as good socially as Moretta. So it's like, which do you weigh more? If you weigh challenges more than strategy, then you should vote for Moretta. If you weigh strategy over challenges, then I think you should vote for Leah. So that's why I lean more towards Leah, because both of their strengths are like the opposite sides and they're both good socially. So it was
Mhm.
like their weaknesses were the other person's strengths. So again, they didn't play the same game. The two of them at least. And I'm not trying to leave Adrian out. I think that like all three of them should be like I said it in the episode to them in person, and I fully believe it. Like if you make the final three, even if you get 0 votes at the end, you should be proud of the fact that you did what it took to get to the final three and outlasted however many other people that were part of that game. It's not easy to do. The rest of the group were almost everybody else there, especially the people that are voted off, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, those first few votes would have loved to be third place and get 0 votes. They'd love to be in Adrian's shoes and get 1 vote and be third place. It's better
Yeah.
than sitting around all day long. So should be proud of that, even if maybe it feels like Adrian, you can tell in her exit interview in that a bonus episode we released that she just seems a little bit like not like down, but like a little bit. She was here all season, and then she's like here.
Yeah.
She seems like she's a little bit like that was. Yeah, I'm sure that was tough. To just sit there and like have to go through all this and defend yourself for it was like a half an hour. It was a little bit more than a half an hour, and then to get 1 vote is like it's tough. So they all deserve kudos. They all deserve compliments. I'm just trying to lay out my case as to why I would have voted for Leah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one thing we should bring up is that Leah did say, me and Moretta are the only ones that played the whole game, and I think
Yeah,
that did play a little bit of a factor in why they got votes too. I don't think the jury
yeah,
even really said much about it, but I think in the back of their mind, like I can definitely see Neil being like, you know what, I got to vote for the players that were in the game the longest that didn't get voted out and then get back into
yeah.
the game because they were the ones that were able to outlast really everything throughout it. Now, you mentioned this earlier. Throughout the day, I was pretty adamant based on everything I had seen. Moretta played a better game than anybody else in the final three. And I felt like at Final Tribal, from sitting in the back and listening, I was like, Moretta, she didn't answer Anna's question about the steal a vote when she won that. Didn't really talk about that when they were asked. But for the most part, I was like, I feel like she is explaining herself the best out of the other two in terms of why she deserves to win. But when you go back and rewatch everything from the editor side of thing and you have all the footage of what you were able to sort through and edit for us to see as viewers, you kind of see more behind the scenes of how Leo was really working the votes and how if it wasn't her directing, I know that we didn't always see it, but it was Chris and her strategizing on what the next person should be voted, who the next person should be voted out.
Yeah.
And then Chris kind of putting that into motion and Leah putting it into motion and knowing who to talk to and who to tell what. And so I really do think that Chris and Leah were really working well together the last few rounds to really kind of set up this Final Four the way that it ended up becoming. And I think they were more in lockstep than people probably realized based on the edit, just because I will never forget when Chris threw that challenge against Cameron. She walked up to him and said, "What are we going to do?" And so
Yeah.
it was instantly, okay, these two are working together. They're planning on what's going to happen. Moretta and Adrian, for the most part, went along with it. There's a few times there where Adrian kind of seemed like she was out of the loop or just didn't want to vote for certain people she'd made alliances with. But she said it. She had turned on a lot of people. So I think that that is partially why she didn't get a lot of votes either, is because she said it like, I did kind of backstab, I did kind of lie. She was kind of the pawn that was used as the liar to try to like get these people to be comfortable and then make their move, which I don't even know if they needed to tell people to be comfortable, because outside of a couple of different people, nobody really had idols. So they could have just been like straightforward, hey, you're going out this round. We're just letting you know,
Yeah.
like, we got the numbers. You don't have anything to do anything different. But overall, you know, you don't, I don't think you weigh challenge wins as much as you weigh strategy. I think strategy to you is way more important in terms of like overall game. I
Strategy
think,
and social game.
yeah,
Challenges mean almost nothing to me.
right. Well, I'm just saying, because you said that Moretta and Leah were on the same page socially to you for the most
Yes.
part, right? So you
Yes.
valued Leah's strategy
Over
more than
Moretta's
Moretta's
challenge ability.
challenge, immunity wins.
Yes.
I would say for me, I do value challenge wins to a degree, because if Moretta doesn't win, a couple of these challenges, she's not in the game still. So I do weigh that a little bit heavier, but because I just don't think people really view Leah as that much of a threat. And that's good strategy and social game, because she kind of used that to like keep people from voting her out, even though she did get a few random votes here and there throughout the game. However, I think that Moretta was not that dominant in challenges throughout the entirety of the season to make me feel like, oh my gosh, she's one of the best challenge beasts we've ever seen, right?
Yeah.
I feel like Leah's strategy in this game specifically was stronger than Moretta's challenge ability. So that's where I would agree with you, that I think you give the nod to Leah to a certain degree in terms of probably playing the better overall game, but not articulating it enough at final tribal council. But for Moretta, never got her name written down. She won the challenges when she needed to. She played a really good social game, but sometimes her decisions did not make any sense at all. So it's like when I try to think of survivors to compare her to, I just watched Survivor Go Wrong, and part of me is thinking like she kind of had a Michelle game, right? But then you also have to realize like some of the decisions she was making would not have been Michelle-esque. So it's kind of like a Philip Shepard mixed with a Michelle based on how she played, because she just didn't make a lot of sense with some of the strategy she was coming up with. So that's kind of an insult to throw Philip Shepard in there, but because he was kind of drug to the final two with Rob, Boston Rob. So, but at the same time, like Michelle is one of these players that was a controversial pick for the winner, but I think people came around on it later, like we talked about today.
Yeah.
And she ended up getting 5 of the final 7 votes at the final tribal council. So very deserving winner, and did a lot of things socially that kind of kept her in the game, and she won challenges when she needed to really help solidify her win. But at the same time, she didn't have the blunders, I think, that Moretta did in terms of social and not social, but strategy specifically.
Yeah.
That kind of felt like I'm loyal to these people, I'm loyal to this tribe, and that's how Philip Shepard was. I'm loyal to Boston Rob. I can't turn my back on this group. This is our final whatever. I've got an alliance with them. I'm not going to change. And so that's just where I kind of was like drawing my comparisons here, David, to kind of explain her game, especially if you're a Survivor fan. Maybe you can kind of understand that a little bit more. Maybe that was too harsh, but that's just kind of how I saw it.
Yeah, no, I don't really disagree. I just didn't think I would hear the name Philip Shepard on a Survivor Indianapolis podcast. But I'll say a few things. So to kind of piggyback off of a few things that you said, that kind of sparked some ideas in my head. You talked about Moretta being Leah not being much of a threat. I think she was actually seen as more of a threat than Moretta was, which is part of why Moretta had 0 votes. I think part of why she had 0 votes is because she did a good job of like when it's time for strategy, she was always just like, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Like, I'll help you with this. I'll do this. So like very willing ally. So that leads to people wanting to work with her and not vote her off. And she did a really good job of being valuable in challenges without being too strong and without being too domineering in the pre-tribal council strategy time, so that no one sees her as a huge threat in that area of the game. So like I think she played her threat level really well. So I'm not saying anything negative there. I'm just saying I think that Leah was seen as more of a threat because people like Drew know these kind of games a little bit better than the average person on this season. Was on Leah's starting tribe, could see how she was controlling things. Eli could see how she was controlling things, and so she was a little bit more of a threat. And I think for her to get to the end with having gotten a couple of votes is impressive. And I will say it's not as impressive. Moretta getting 0 votes is really, really impressive. That is something that she should have been hammering on much more than she did. That's
sure.
one. It's one of the knocks I would say in her, because she knew that going in. I didn't know it going. I hadn't realized it. Mason mentions it in his vote for her, and I was like, "Wait a minute, is that true?" And you don't see it in the episode, but I asked her after we kind of crowned her as the winner. I asked her, "Did you know that you didn't get any votes? Is that true?" Like I went back and I always write down all the votes, so I kind of have a running tally of who has gotten this many votes and how many votes did this vote go down, and I just track all of it so that I know what's going on that day. And I did see she had gotten no votes, and she said, "Yeah, no, I knew," but she didn't mention it. I don't think she mentioned it in a confessional. She didn't mention it in Final Tribal Council. And when given Eli's question, I thought was fantastic. Basically, try to get them to like give some dirt on the other person and say why you were better than them. Moretta just like tries to shovel Leah under the bus by being like, "Oh, you weren't loyal. You didn't vote with me on Final Four," and then she says that like she goes to Adrian like, "I don't really know what to say. Like I don't feel like you had a negative." And I was like, "What?" And Leah was like, "Of course Adrian had some negative. They all had negatives." So I was like, "Of course you have a negative." And Leah piped up like she didn't play half the game. She was voted off for several rounds, whatever, and kind of fills that in. But it felt like Moretta spent most of her attention on putting herself above Leah, which was smart. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but she kind of let Adrian kind of do whatever she do or say whatever she wanted to. Like she like steps in and corrects Leah on something, not like corrects her like she was wrong, but like says like I didn't see it that way, I saw it a different way, and like kind of rebuts her in that way, which I think it probably worked out for her favor. But it was interesting to me that she was so honed in on Leah. And a couple of things that I was just like, I feel like that if Leah had come back, it would have almost blew up in Moretta's face, because there's a couple of things like she, one of the ones was like I got asked a question about what was your best moment in the game. Basically, I think it might have been Annie's question. I don't remember now. It was one of the girls, and Moretta's answer was like the first challenge of the entire game was her best move, and it was like her best moment in the game. And I was like, that's a terrible answer, Moretta. Like,
Yeah.
You won, you deserve to win, but like that's a terrible answer. And she was like giving Chris credit and like complimenting people, like, oh, me and Anna worked so well together, and Chris led us in that challenge. And I was like, but you won a challenge where you would have been voted off if you hadn't won the challenge.
Yeah.
You're not gonna mention that. But even that moment, like she would have been voted off if she doesn't win that challenge, but not because she was too big of a threat, because the numbers were against her, right? It was all original Siakam, and she was the one on Sheboy. So it was kind of like by default that she would get voted off, and she wins that challenge. So I think that context a little bit being clarified would have helped a little bit. I don't know. Her answer she had another answer that I was like a little bit like caught off guard by. She talked about what was she talked about the vote that just happened. She said they asked like what was your biggest moment in the, it's like there was two different like similar questions of like basically what was your biggest moment in the game, or what did you think was the biggest moment and biggest move. And the biggest move, she said it was going to be the Final Four vote if we voted off Chris, but Leah switched on that, and I was like, that's a terrible answer.
You're giving Leah credit.
You're saying your biggest move is that it didn't happen. This vote that didn't end up happening was my biggest move. Then you didn't do anything, and that's not even true. Moretta like did things in this game. She had moves. She did. It was like she couldn't think of anything. It was like, well, I was gonna say getting out Chris because she just knew Chris was a big threat, right? And she answered that question well about the biggest threat. That was still her game. I think she mentioned Chris. And it was like just a couple of those answers. I was just like, Leah's answers I think were more like here, whereas Moretta's were like really high, really low, really high, really low, and it just ended up working out for her. But there's two or three of them that I was like, that's a terrible answer. And if Leah would pounce on that, maybe it would be a little bit more clear of like, because Leah tried. she said like, "Well, I didn't vote with you because I was being loyal. I just wasn't being loyal to you. I was being loyal to my husband. Like that loyalty supersedes this game. So I'm gonna be loyal to that person over you." She tries to get that out there, but I just think it was like kind of too late, which is interesting because Neil votes off of loyalty and he votes for Moretta. So I wanted to ask you this. This is the one I'm kind of building towards. I watched this yesterday for the first time, just watched it start to finish. And what caught my eye in the Final Tribal Council was loyalty. And this idea that Moretta was the only loyal player in the game. That she was the one that showed the most loyalty, and that's why she deserved to win. I don't think that's true. Am I wrong?
Who do you think was more loyal than Moretta? Was it Leah?
Uh, I don't think any
It
of them were
wasn't
that.
Adrian.
No, it wasn't Adrian, but Adrian also wasn't like, to me, she wasn't super disloyal either. She was
No.
loyal to the people that she was loyal to, just because she wasn't loyal to everybody. Like you can't be loyal to everybody.
Yeah, she was.
If you're loyal to everybody, then you're like ultimately you're loyal to nobody. Because
Yeah,
in this game, it's going to backfire on you. Like to me, it was like they made it seem like Moretta is a 10 out of 10 on loyalty. She'd never betrayed anybody ever. What happened to Cameron? What happened to Sonya? What happened to Chris? That's all her original Sheba people that she turned on, and she should have.
and
It helped,
Seth.
and Seth. It helped her game. Let me be totally clear. That was
Yeah.
the right move by Moretta. That was like she made the right moves, and I mean, obviously she won, so like
Yeah.
she deserved all of that. I'm not saying she did the wrong thing, but to paint that as loyalty, I was like, wow,
Yeah. Well,
it caught me off guard.
and it's very funny that most of that came from Neil, right? Because Neil was Siakam strong, and I'm only voting for a Siakam. He's got two
Yeah.
Siakam in the final three, and he votes for a Shibwe. So, it's kind of it's kind of ironic here that it's just like what is happening is overthinking, this, right? I will say this: Moretta did a good job of knowing where the votes were going, but never
Yes.
taking full credit for that vote off.
Yeah.
So she could basically say, well, I didn't want to vote off Cameron. I didn't want to vote off Sonya. I didn't want to vote off Seth, but I knew that if I didn't, it was going to be me. So I was loyal as far as I could go. Like that's how she could play that. Now she didn't really
Yes.
say that, but
Well, she didn't have to because no one pushed her on it.
What-
That's the thing is the
that's the
jury.
thing,
The jury
too.
just kind of gave her loyalty. It was like, yeah,
Yes.
you were loyal. And I was like, but she like she wasn't. Maybe she was technically more loyal than the other two, but it was marginal. It was not like she was
and-
like.
and
It wasn't
here's-
like she was the loyal person. The rest of them were like just backstabbers. Like I don't know that was a weird picture to paint to me of like in this game you're gonna have to betray people. You're going to have to because you have to get down to final three.
yeah.
And so like you're just gonna it's gonna happen. So to be like to draw a line in the sand, that, like Moretta is a loyal one, the other two are just evil backstabbers, and they didn't go that crazy with it. But I was just like, why? I don't get
Yeah.
that.
And I think one of the things too with Moretta, I think Drew brought this up. I know Drew voted for Leah, right? Because he was
Yes.
really contemplating what he wanted to do, but him and Cameron both voted for Leah as well as Chris. So she got 3 votes, which, and those are probably some of our better players in the game in terms of like savvy thinking of who deserved it. So, I mean, I respect their opinions a lot, but I thought it was interesting that Drew brought up several different times, like, even when I was out and I knew that I was going to get the idol played on me and this, that, and that, Moretta came and talked to me, right? And so to me, I
Yeah.
think part of that is like, oh, it's probably not loyalty, but it's kindness. And I think sometimes they got confused a little bit by some of the jury members being like, well, she was really kind and she wanted to make sure that I was in a good spot, even though she had to turn on me. She wanted to make sure I was okay. And so I don't think it's necessarily loyalty all the way to a certain degree, but for the most part, I mean,
Yeah.
she was loyal to the alliances that she made at first, right? Like she was loyal to Shibwe. I don't really think she was in an alliance. I think she was kind of with Anna and Chris, and then Anna gets voted off. So now she's kind of like a sitting duck or just kind of like in limbo. Like, where do I go next? Didn't trust Chris early on. Mason's like, hey, we're going to vote out. So, okay, let me latch onto this. I'll be loyal to this, right? So she
Yeah.
never really had to take credit for like, oh, I was the one that made the big
Yes.
dirty moves. I was just loyal. And I tried to play the most loyal game possible. And so I think out of the 3, she probably was the
Yeah.
most loyal, but I don't think that her loyalty was like above and beyond
Yeah.
what the other twos were. Like, I mean, for the most part, I would say Adrian was very loyal to Siakam until
Yeah.
she had to go to best class. So,
Yeah.
and at
Well, she
that
got
point,
voted off. Yeah, right? Like Drew voted her
by an
off.
idol, right?
And she should have voted for Annie when Annie got voted off. She did not because she was
Yeah.
loyal to Annie. Like
Yeah.
that's the thing is they all had moments of loyalty and moments of deceit, and like it just this is how this game works. And so for me to like draw your vote purely off of that, which I don't think anyone purely did. I think it was like you said more about kindness, and even Drew's jury question and moment you're talking about, I thought he was talking about Leah in that moment, not Moretta. Maybe I'm wrong. Like, and Moretta did play like that kind of kind, sweet, like just check in with people and talk to people and humor people, even though you aren't going to get, even though you're not going to vote with them. But maybe I'm just wrong. But I thought he was talking about Leah.
Did
Maybe
he
he's talking about
did he say
Leah
Leah always
and
talked to him? Because they were not on the same tribe, so that would make sense if he
no,
said
they
that.
were on the same tribe.
No, no,
Leah
no. Him and Moretta were
Drew.
not on the same tribe.
Yeah, I know.
But still,
I thought it was Leah because Leah
okay.
and him were on the same tribe.
I
That's part
thought
of
he said something about Moretta. Talked to him when he was going to get voted
maybe
out.
maybe that round. Maybe it was just that.
Yeah,
Maybe it was just that
and I
round.
wondered if it was kind of like she always brought him in because I don't feel like all the girls talked to the boys
Yeah,
when it was kind of like at the merge and post
sure.
merge. But I feel like Moretta made
Yeah,
the round socially to do that. That's what I think happened here with Drew. I could be wrong. He could have mentioned Leah as well being someone that always talked to him, but I thought he, like you mentioned earlier, felt like Leah was a threat early on and she was kind of controlling things.
yeah. I just thought in that very beginning he mentioned Leah. I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
He
Again,
just said he
like
had fun. He didn't really
the
ask how many
audio,
questions.
the audio quality is like a little messy with those mics. It's like it's either really great or it's like really rough. So I
Yeah.
could have just misheard it something, or maybe I wasn't listening very carefully because in my mind I thought it was Leah. So on
Yeah.
the day of, I thought it was Leah he was talking about.
Yeah.
So
He might have been. I'm just misremembering from when I
yeah,
watched it a week ago. So that's
sure.
potentially my bad. But we are about 56 minutes into this
Yeah.
podcast. So anything else we want to discuss before?
No, I'm good to move on. Is there anything we don't have? We kind of been talking as we've been going along. Um, about, I mean, every recap episode, I mean, about the season as a whole. Any final thoughts on the season? Because we're not gonna talk. We're gonna have some exit interviews with the players coming up, but we're not gonna talk you and I anymore about this season. So, any parting thoughts for Advantage Island in the season?
Yeah, I will say that Advantage Island was probably more of a flop than we thought it would be. I think we kind of
The
tried to
twist
force,
itself,
yeah,
right?
try to force a little bit more gameplay than we actually got.
Mhm.
I think at the end, the better players kind of rose to the top. I felt like this was probably your best four of the entire game. Maybe Cameron should have been in that group as well, but like based on how players are playing, it felt like these were the ones that kind of separated themselves, in my personal opinion, in terms of all three of the outwit, outplay, outlast survivor strategy as it goes. But I thought the challenges were really good. It felt like they were pretty competitive. We didn't really have one dominant tribe versus another dominant tribe. I thought the merge was really interesting, how we had some different plays with idols and, individual immunity wins. And other than that, I mean, I think that potentially maybe we could have got a little bit more strategizing from the players, but that also comes, that also is part of the territory of having all new players that aren't
Yeah,
super survivor savvy. So they learned the game along the way. I felt like a lot of them said that I really learned how to play this game the more I got into it. And
yeah,
so there's probably like 4 or 5 players I wouldn't mind seeing play again in a returning players season, which I don't know if I've always felt that way about players that have played before. So pretty good cast. It was a fun game, very competitive at some points, but also very well sportsmanlike. I guess you could say good sportsmanship from everybody. Nobody really got too high or too low about stuff. I think the person that probably took getting voted out the worst was Seth. And other than that, I felt like everybody just understood like the game and didn't take it personal, and they just wanted to see the best person win. And so I felt like everybody kind of had like a good head going into
yeah,
final tribal of like, okay, like my vote's open here. Like I'm not just so set on one person. So I thought overall, like I didn't really know who was going to win, and I think that's what makes it exciting. And I think getting Chris out when they did it made for a more dramatic final three, like he mentioned, I think will be more interesting
yeah.
for the viewer because he said if I'm there, I win this easily. So
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I agree with what you're saying. Overall, there, I think we can do a couple things. A couple things I'm gonna take away from this. One, I still think there is some work to be done on trying to figure out how to, without forcing it too much, how to make the tribal lines not be quite so deep. I don't mind that loyalty if that works for people, but I think that a lot of people just do it by default because it's easy without really realizing that this is terrible for their game.
hmm
We saw that for several people this season that just they rode with their original tribe to their detriment. Um, so a way to work on that is something I'm looking at in the future. A way to get people to come into the game ready to play, give them a better explanation, give them maybe some video content. I think I'm going to bring in Bloomberg's rules for how to play Survivor. Kind of just give them those at least. Like, you should at least have a general idea of like here's some basic tips and tricks for how to succeed in this game. Um, I think we're getting better and better at how to help them pregame and how to set them up for success, but there's still work to be done there. And in terms of the specifics of this season, and what we did with Advantage Island, well, what I'm going to take away from it at least is I don't think we need to force putting advantages into the game. And we were very careful. Like we weren't really forcing the advantages into the game. We were just forcing a mechanic through which they could be put into the game, and we were doing that as a way to like try to get some cross tribal alliances going at Advantage Island, try to get people separated from their tribe for a little bit, just to kind of like break things up a little bit. And it ended up kind of, to me, it ended up leading towards the people that were gone getting voted off more often than not, and it didn't really create cross tribal bonds, and it didn't get that many advantages out into the game. So it was like kind of a flop on that regard, like you said. I will say what I want to use from this is like in these moments where maybe we have an odd number of players, like we did with Leah, where she was the odd person out of the swap. We can use Advantage Island. We won't call it that, maybe we won't, but it'll be the same kind of thing. We can have them go do something fun, right? If we have an odd, like just say like the second challenge of the season, it's 7 versus 8. Well, why don't we have that odd person instead of sitting out, go do something, right? And we can have it a little puzzle or a little whatever set up for them. And if they win, maybe they get an extra vote, make it something small, right? Like I just think using the positives from that, I think could be fun, and finding a way to give people something to do besides just stand around. And maybe don't do that every single time that there's people sitting out of a challenge, but just as a mechanic to have that, like, so we're not just having 2 or 3 people sitting out of a challenge, which doesn't happen very often. But I think that's what I'm going to take away from it. But honestly, like every season we try new things, and certain things I don't like, and certain things we do like, and we just kind of take that and move forward. So that's really what I'm trying to do with that, and trying to get you guys out of here so you can listen in the future to these exit interviews we're going to have with the players.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say this too. Like, I think that most of the challenges this year, like we've had challenges before, we were just like, oh, that challenge was a flop. I don't think we should do that challenge again. This year, we didn't feel that way about any of the challenges. So I think we did a good job of coming up with challenges that were fun and competitive for everybody involved, and they worked. And, there were some things we probably would change about some of the challenges. Maybe we didn't separate the balance beams far enough on some of them. Like we had maybe set up and it just was miscalculated when person was setting it up that didn't know exactly how to set it up. But that's okay. I mean, I can live with that. And I think that everybody that played didn't feel like there was a disadvantage in any of the challenges either. So that was what was fun. And, as we try to get different challenges, new challenges, things like that, we want to make it where it's competitive, but also a good challenge that's fair. And that's what we really want to do. That's like, we want to give people the benefit of the doubt. Like the plate challenge with the BB gun, like that just didn't work a couple of years ago, and so we had to kind of make the most out of it, right, and things like that. Or the slingshot, I think it was before the BB gun. So it was a flop of a challenge to a certain degree, but we tried something new, and if it wouldn't have been so windy and things like that, maybe it would have been better. So you just never know what the elements are going to provide either. So I thought we did a much better job on the challenges, and I felt like nobody really got screwed in any way with how we did those. So to me, that made it more fair. There weren't that many twists in the game that really hurt somebody besides the swap, which that's classic Survivor. So that just, you got to deal with it. Mason is getting the raw end of that deal. But other than that, everything else was really fair. The advantages, like you said, gameplay, it was fine. Could have been better, but like, you're right. Don't need to force it. Just need to give them more time to strategize and figure things out. And, lesson learned. Advantage Island sounds cool. But I think the name was cooler than what we saw come from it.
Yeah, for sure. But overall, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode and this season. We are going to have the plan is to have 2 seasons in 2025. Probably only going to have the first season will probably have limited video. And so we probably won't do a whole lot of like this kind of content with that season, but then we'll have a second standard season where we'll be back, and we'll see, depending on the turnout and the feedback we get from these kind of episodes. Maybe we'll do this kind of stuff again. Maybe we won't. But it may be a while. It may be like it may be a year and a half before. Honestly, like it may be a year and a half before we get like the footage of that out. We worked ourselves a little bit too hard and pushed a little bit too hard to get this started this season, to get the video started. And we had the game in the beginning of June, and we finished at the beginning of December. So 6 months from filming, basically, we've aired everything except for some exit interviews. So like, and really, it's been out for a week. So, it's been less than that. That's a very tight window for even for the amateur stuff that we're doing here. So
Yeah.
that's probably going to change moving forward, just for the sake of number one, our own sanity and our own schedules and our families and all that stuff, but also for the sake of quality. I think the more time that we give it, the better quality we're going to get out to you guys. So in the meantime, if you want to play, and I don't know that, then you should probably tell me. So you can comment. The Facebook group's a good way to get a hold of me if you don't know me personally. If you know me personally, just talk to me, message me, whatever. Don't be shy. I need to know who wants to play. I have a good list of people, but I'm always looking for more people. I'm not in any rush to get returning players out there. I do want to have some returning player seasons in the next few years, but like, I'm not in a rush. So if you haven't played before, or you have played before and you haven't expressed to me that you really want to play again, now's the time to do that. Let me know. So we'll probably start casting in the late winter, early spring, and we'll get a move on season 6.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and I know there's a lot of people that we've talked to since we played this season, right? That we're excited about potentially playing. Now there has been some dead time since there, holidays, school starting back up. There's been a lot going on since we've actually done this season, but I think moving forward for video stuff, we're going to try to make sure we don't spoil the winners on social media moving forward, so that you don't already know who won when you're coming into watching this, because there were some photos out there from our social team that threw some stuff out, and we're going to try to change it, make the video content a little bit better, make sure we don't have a lot of lapses here in terms of like not having audio, things like that. And so I'll probably be transitioning into a different role with Survivor the next season we play out at the Coppels. So it'll be a lot of fun, and I think that we're going to get better video quality. So if you guys love this stuff, let us know, because at the end of the day, like we need to know what you like, what you don't like. Because if we're spending hours upon hours doing this and it's not really getting us the bang for our buck, maybe we can try to figure out some things. But I do think that better quality content is coming. It's just we learn every year what we need to do differently, and so I think feedback helps. And so, like David said, if you haven't already and you want to apply to play Survivor Indianapolis, do that. Email is what again, David?
It is survivorindianapolis@gmail.com. Very straightforward. Just the name, survivorindianapolis@gmail.com. Or there's a Facebook group for Survivor Indianapolis on Facebook. If you don't have Facebook, the email is fine. And if you do have Facebook, or if you know me personally, just let me know.
Yeah, I'll make sure I put it in the graphic, so you guys will see the email at the bottom of this graphic here as you're watching this on YouTube. So you don't have an excuse of not knowing where to find it, because it's going to be right there in front of your face for an hour plus. So other than that, great season. Congratulations, Moretta. Very deserving winner. Congratulations to our final 3. All of our players, thank you for coming out. It was a lot of fun. A lot of, energy spent. Like Leah said, it's a long day. And, I think that does play a factor into your mind working on what to say at the end of your final travel. So shout out to them. And lastly, shout out Moretta. Never once called it Tribal Council. Always called it the Council.
The Council. The Council.
My favorite thing about Moretta, well, we just had our last council. Like, this is great. This is great.
Yeah. I like you said, an incredible cast. This top to bottom, my favorite cast we've had so far. The best cast we've had so far. And Rude. I mean, just saying, not they're just like, if you rated every player on a scale of 1 to 10 and then averaged it, I think this is the best average cast.
I would agree. Very good cast.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that maybe your cast and other casts had some top tier people that I want to have played again, already have played again, but we didn't have anyone leave early. And that's really crazy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And again, like I spent a lot of time talking up Leah. I did not want that to come across as talking down to Moretta. She deserved to win. I was excited when she won. It's a pretty good winner. It's a very good winner. We've had other winners. We've had good winners. We've had winners. She's a really good winner. So, not trying to talk down to her. I just personally would have voted for Leah. So, great cast, great final 3. That's it. Let's get out of here.
All right, David. We will see y'all probably not next week, but you'll be back. Exit interviews. Who do you have up first on the docket? Eli?
Eli Kramer will be coming at you first. That'll probably be like just a few days, like maybe Thursday.
All right, so be on the lookout for the exit interviews. David does a great job hosting this show. I'm glad I could be able to join him, talk Survivor Indianapolis weekly with you guys, and thank you all much. Thank you all so much for being a part of the crew. Now, see, I do a regular podcast, so I'm used to closing this. I feel like I'm taking over right now. But David, if you want to be on Survivor Indianapolis and you love this show, you got to hit me with 3 words. Let's go Survivor. Ready? 1,
Yeah, let's do it.
2, 3.
Let's go, Survivor. We're so off.